welcome back to the A10 build. We're on episode 5 now. Today we're going to be going through weathering patterns, another divisive topic on the A10, which is an aircraft that is only getting more and more attention the further the Russians stream into Ukraine over the last month. The A10, of course, being designed to take out armored vehicles, specifically armored vehicles moving in columns, which is exactly what the Russians are doing. The US isn't currently in this fight, so no A10 support for the time being. Only the future knows what's going to happen. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. The aircraft actually is a lot further in progression than is currently shown in the video, but I have some catching up to do. It's been an interesting and very busy couple of months for me, and so I'm quite a bit behind. We're also changing camera angles. My GoPro unfortunately died, and so we're onto a different camera in a different position. I'm not sure I'm going to stay with this position. It doesn't seem to work quite as well. The focusing is particularly tricky, and there's no way for me to verify focus. As the angle of this video was shot at, I can't actually see the back of the camera to see what the camera is seeing. Anyway, so first thing we're going to start out with on weathering is panel line accent. It was particularly heavy-handed on this model. I'm still getting used to it on the whole, and it's something I'm trying to work on personally. But the idea being, you have a very thin kind of paint. It's not paint. It's hard to describe. It's a very thin stained liquid, and the idea is that you go ahead and you run a little bead of it into the panel lines of the model, and it spreads through the panel lines and kind of accentuates dirt and grime and shadow and really accentuates the individual panels on the aircraft. If you look at any aircraft, including actually the A10 at the start of this video, you can see the division in the panel lines from the photograph, and you can also see all the rivets where it's collected dirt and other debris from being in service. And so what we do is we go ahead and we start with the panel line accent, and we take the brush that comes with the bottle. I believe it's a Tamiya product. Yes, it is a Tamiya panel line accent color, black. It comes in a little bottle, and it's got a little brush attached to the stopper. I believe there's a close-up of it later in the video. And so you just massage the paint into the panel lines, and it spreads, and then you wait for it to set up a little bit, and then you come back with a thinner. And so this is where it gets very important to know which paint you're using and to plan ahead. So the panel line accent takes an enamel thinner, which will not work on the paints that we are using. All the Tamiya paints are acrylic, so the Tamiya acrylic thinner won't actually react with the enamel, and vice versa. The enamel thinner won't thin the acrylic, and so you can use the enamel thinner on top of the acrylic paint. It won't damage it, it won't start taking it off, but it will help you to adjust your panel line accents using the enamel panel line accent from Tamiya that I use. And so it's nice. It lets you adjust and make a lot of fine adjustments. You can sit and take your time as I'm doing here. And so at this point you're seeing in the video, I'm alternating between a Q-tip and a paintbrush to spread some of the enamel thinner and really massage it into the cracks where I want to lighten it up a little bit, and then take some of the over brushing away. As I said, I was quite heavy-handed in the application here, but ultimately it came out looking pretty good. Have another focusing moment here, and yeah, you can see where I got heavy-handed against the wing root to the fuselage joint. And so what we'll end up doing is we'll spread the thinner. It'll look like it's dyeing the entire panel black, and we'll go over with a Q-tip, and that'll absorb it up again. And it also really helps to blend it back into the aircraft. We're not going to go ahead and do rivets on this model kit. That's going to be overkill for right now, and realistically I should have done it before the aircraft was assembled. Would have been the easier time. That way I could have really gotten into all of the nooks and crannies. I wouldn't be able to get into the rivets between the engine, nacelle, and the fuselage. So that's another thing that we'll work on next time to improve. This is the second A10 I've built. It's going to be far from the last, but I think next time we'll go and explore some of the other kits. I believe it's either Tamiya or Hasegawa make a 1:48 A10, and so that's the direction we'll go. Quickly on screen, you can see the Tamiya panel accent line, and I used Tester's enamel thinner in order to thin it. So moving on from the thinner, I wanted to try something new that I've never personally done before, and that is actually a panel wash. And so I'm using a MIG product, MIG, not associated with Mikoyan Grunovich, the aircraft manufacturer. And essentially this just kind of gives some staining, as if mimicking dirt and debris from the ground, especially on the underside of the aircraft. I like to do it, I did it in brown this time. You can get it in different colors. I think I just ordered a black one and got it. I haven't used it yet, and I won't be on this aircraft. So the idea is kind of the same, similar as panel line, except for you're going for the bigger surfaces that would be stained with dirt and debris and other things. And you know, for aircraft like this, you also have to factor in the idea of like hydraulic leaks and fuel leaks and things like that trap dirt and debris and become this kind of gelatinous substance that ends up sprayed down the underside of the aircraft. And so it's essentially the same process as doing the panel line. You're going to go ahead and brush it on and concentrate it in usually after the panel line areas. You'd concentrate it there and try to spread it down as if motion and air resistance and whatnot had pushed dirt and debris down the airframe. This is the first time I've used it, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. I am by far not an expert in this. But overall, I did, once I had thinned it and kind of brushed it down a little bit, I did enjoy the overall effect of it, and I think it's something I'm going to continue using and would like to get significantly better. The A10, with all the pylons it has, is a prime example of a good candidate to use some weathering techniques like this. You've got a lot of nooks and crannies in where the pylons and hard points are on the aircraft under the wings that dirt and debris will get trapped in. And if you've ever been next to an in-service aircraft or museum aircraft that hasn't been repainted and cleaned in quite a while, you'll see all that dirt and debris gets tracked in there. Around the gun, I went ahead and stained it. A lot of the times you'll get gun gas staining, which is usually a darker tint color, particularly on like World War II aircraft. You'd see it more often. And it's just usually black staining around the wings aft of the gun ports for your piston engine fighters and whatnot. But anyway, back to more modern aircraft. We're going to go ahead and use the same enamel thinner. It is an enamel-based panel line accent. We're going to thin it up and brush it and kind of try streak it aft as we go. And so it's going to smooth out to kind of more of a ebbing and flowing dirty scheme, you know, as if the dirt's been there for a while, it's spread out, it's become more dissolved in with the color of the airframe. We're going to keep following the same recipe as we did with the panel line accent, and that is we're going to grab a paintbrush with thinner on it. We're going to grab a Q-tip. You're going to spread the thinner in with the panel line wash and use the Q-tip to go ahead and kind of smooth and blend it just to get a good average color through the panel. And that way it's somewhat representative of an aircraft that's been in the fleet for a while. And again, you don't have to do this step, right? So if you like your aircraft looking bright, shiny, and new as if it's the first prototype going on its first delivery flight to the evaluation, you know, or an aircraft that's just come out of maintenance, it's bright and shiny, doesn't have a lick of dirt on it, it's entirely up to you, you know. Weathering is a very contentious subject in the model building community. If, you know, when I ever get over 5 people that watch these videos, we'll go ahead and have comments probably, oh, you did this wrong, or you go see any of the other builders, and they'll have a lot of comments about different techniques or people that are legitimately saying, thank you, I've never tried this, and then you've got the other experts and people that have pretty strong opinions saying, that's not the way I would have done it, here's the way I would have done it. That's ultimately, it's what you're looking for, right? So as long as you're happy building your model, yeah, who cares? So add as much, add as little as you want. Now, the inside of the, I guess they're called spoilerons on the A10, went ahead and added some dirt. I think realistically looking back at it, I should have gone back and painted those kind of the chromated primer color that the US military uses for a primer base coat. That probably would have been a good deal more realistic, but I went ahead and kept it gray. And so what we're doing here is we're just rubbing in some panel line accent and some wash into the spoilerons to go ahead and simulate the fact that these are active devices. They open and then they're closed, and so you're going to end up with quite a good amount of dirt in there, particularly during ground events such as landing and taxiing around. You'll end up with a good amount of dirt, and there's also hydraulic actuators in there, so minor hydraulic leaks probably are relatively common. And so from there, we're going to jump over to the nacelles, because as I was doing the weathering, I noticed that I had actually dripped some panel line accent from the fan blades. So what I did was I went in with a panel line accent and tried to go lightly up the edges of where the fan blades are. The Revell kit has a one-piece molded fan at the front of the TF-34 model, and so I went down the edge of the fan blade just to kind of give it a darkened shadow, as if to suggest that there actually is a cut there. I think if you wanted to be hyper realistic, I imagine there's probably a resin kit out there that has a fan that's got individual blades, or if you have the tools, you could probably cut down that fan to show differentiation between the blades. But I just went ahead and did it with the panel line accent. But I did unfortunately touch the side of the nacelle or the inlet area of the nacelle with the panel line, so I went back in there and mixed up a little bit of gray and took care of it. And so from there, we move on to one of the hardest parts. I did not film masking the canopy. It is an extremely long, extremely boring, extremely tedious procedure to do. This is the point where you want to be very familiar with how aircraft canopies are laid out, or go look at some reference material. Everything that's clear in the model is not what's actually clear in the aircraft. Aircraft canopies usually have structural frames to them, and then they have an acrylic or a glass or whatever material bonded in. Like for the SR-71, for example, it's actually quartz. So you go ahead and you use a little bit of masking tape. There's modeling masking tape, which is what I'm using here, which is very, very thin. You can actually see the roll of it above my right thumb. And what we do is you go ahead and wrap that round, press it on, and then use a very fine razor blade to trim it to the right size and try to avoid scratching the plastic. And so I would recommend spraying to do it. I did it by brush this time. I think it didn't come out quite as well as I would have liked with a brush. It's not bad, particularly with a thinned paint, it's not bad. And I also painted outside and in, and that made it a little bit better. But I think the overall finish would have been better using the airbrush. And so I'm going to show a little bit. I'm not going to show all of the decals being applied to the aircraft, but we're going to go ahead and start on the left wing. I use Microsol and Microset to apply the decals. I don't remember if I talked during the paint section, but you have to apply decals to a gloss finish. So even though the A-10 is not a gloss finished aircraft, you want to put a gloss layer down in your paint because it smooths out if you were to look through a microscope and look at the paint finish surface, it helps smooth it out. I noticed a little bit more roughness than I would have liked on the wing, so I grabbed a 3000 grit sanding pad and just gave it a light scrub, and that smoothed it out. Applied a layer of Microsol, went ahead and soaked the decal in water. These are all water transfer decals. Top tip, remember if you've got an old kit, the decals are as old as the kit is, so depending how old they are, you have to be extremely gentle with some of them. And what I do is I just use a Q-tip, and once it's ready to come off, I drag it off. And then I try to absorb as much of the Microsol as possible, and then I'll run back over with Microset to really set the decal and promote adhesion onto the surface of the plastic. Try to dry it off as much as possible. I have noticed that sometimes it will stain the paint a little bit. Usually rubbing it with a Q-tip will kind of scrub that staining off, and it seems to work pretty well. And so the A-10 has a ton of decals. I did not show them all. I haven't actually finished applying them all at this point. It's something I hope to finish today as I'm recording this. Some of them are more complex than others. You know, the star was very easy. This one on the nose is not quite as simple. It's going around a complex curve, so you have to be very patient, very gentle with it. And of course, you will have that decal that fights you, the one you just can't quite get lined up. Don't get angry, don't get frustrated, just be persistent, be very patient, and make sure you start to massage the decal into the right location. So we'll go ahead and continue adding decals, but the next steps after decal, you then go back and apply a dull or a matte clear coat in a paint scheme like this. That way you don't have the shiny reflectiveness. I mean, you can see the shine on it from this video. And so you go back over with the matte. You want to, I am a little cautious. I stand off a little bit more with the airbrush initially just because I don't want to hit these freshly laid decals that hopefully are adhered with an airbrush blast. So I stand off a little bit and gradually work a little bit closer. We'll cover that in a subsequent, probably part 6. I'm not going to show all the decals being applied. It's a lot of rinse and repeat. Almost, actually, yeah, we are soaking them in water, so it basically is rinsing. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here as you're seeing me apply the last couple of decals I'm going to show, and we'll move to part 6.